Thank you, Mark. I'm Nelly Ortiz. I was actually lucky enough to be born in the US, but also lucky enough to grow up in different countries around the world, mainly in Colombia. So I always say I'm Colombian. Worked in technology most of my life, currently leading the digital strategy team of a technology services company called NTT Data. So very excited to share one of the ideas that I love around technology here, as we call it, hacking the wealth gap with technology.
So why don't you explain that? Because I mean, I understand hacking. I do that all the time. I had a show called Hacking the Red Circle, and now you're saying hacking the wealth gap. So why don't you start by just setting us straight on what you mean by the wealth gap?
Right. So for me, I think growing up in Colombia, and I feel like I have a lot of friends in developing countries too, you realize that the wealth gap is bigger and bigger in those countries, right? And I think there's just some barriers of entry for entrepreneurs or people that want to understand how to become wealthy that, right now with technology are reducing. And I think it's so exciting to see how technology or the different technologies out there can help us reduce that wealth gap. That's what I really want to start tackling today with you.
So we're at a weird time right now where all the big tech, right, where everybody wants to, think they can make billions of dollars, but venture capitalists kind of waiting on the sideline. There's, big tech is there's been tens of thousands of people laid off. So it's kind of a flex. It wasn't like it was in 2019. So it feels very different. Yet I think as an entrepreneur myself in the entrepreneurial spirit, people are still coming up with ideas. So as you're running into these people, what kind of encouragement are you giving them in the midst of a lot of turmoil?
Right. I love the fact that, or in a way, I want to understand more the word technology or make everyone understand a little bit more. I feel like now everyone's a technology company, but then people always feel like that big tech is the only technology companies there are. And it's funny because if you really define technology is just any process or any device or anything really that can manipulate or change the environment of a human being. That could mean It could be a hammer or a knife or AI or metaverse. So what I find interesting, I feel like that's why people are fearing the word technology so much too, because we kind of put it in a bucket of such a far away thing that I can't understand. Whereas if you really start thinking about technology, like anything out there that can disrupt how we work, how we live as human beings, it's much more simple. So I feel like, there's different types of technologies. And if we see the technologies that are now based out of internet and the things that we have built currently, there's a level, let's say, of understanding that people need to get more and knowledge that needs to have, so then you can actually manipulate that technology as a tool and do things with it. So for me, I would say, start learning more. Like knowledge is such a big thing, and really understanding more about these technologies, new things that are out there, to be able to figure out how you can resolve a need of your same community or anything that even for yourself.
One of the things I've noticed, you have you have a global reach, but let's talk about Latin America for a little bit. My experience is that the technological prowess of the general population is very high, and that in fact there are businesses who pull together these teams of people. It could be, a person and their 10 friends, and they become offshore for US companies for technology. So it's not just doing Eastern Europe or India, but that there's a huge business in South America in outsourcing for American companies. Are you seeing that as well?
Oh, definitely. Just the past, like right now, I'm in NTT Data. So very global right now. I work with a lot of people from Latin America and Europe, and most of our, let's say, centers, development centers are actually in Latin America and Europe. So, depends on what you need and what type of need you have. We can have different people located in different locations. What we love about kind of what we call more closer shore, because offshore, I would say, we call it near shore.
Near shore, okay. It's a new word for me. Okay.
Yeah, near shore, actually, there's a lot of benefits from it, right? You have potentially a language that is easier for you to understand. You also have the same time zone in many different regions where you are located in the US. And culturally, I feel sometimes we even understand each other better. So
I had a project that I worked on for a couple of years, building an AI actually for a large company where my CTO was down in Curitiba, Brazil. And I didn't realize that that is a center for technology in Brazil. Why don't we talk about that for a second? Because when we think of global centers of tech, people will move to Silicon Valley to be able to get a job and kind of, if they're not entrepreneurial and want to start a thing, so they're trying to close that wealth gap, they may go get some experience working in Silicon Valley. Where are some of the centers around the world that our listener may not be aware of?
Well, this is a great question. I feel like now that everyone's a digital nomad,
yeah,
or at
right.
least want to be.
Sure.
I think most of my friends actually, well, if it's not evident enough, I'm a millennial. And I think people used to bash about millennials until Gen Z came around, and now everyone's going against.
Now you're okay.
Gen Z, and now we're okay. But millennials were the first ones saying, I don't need an office, and I don't need a home. Like, so we were just trying to figure out experiences of where to go, and we can travel from everywhere. That's, I think, one of the benefits of technology really is that you can go and really travel from anywhere and maybe have access to places that are beautiful and have less of a cost of living. So just because I'm Colombian, it's easier for me to say, for example, Medellin became a hub of technology, where everyone's an expat now. They rent a beautiful apartment or buy, and they're making or their own startups and have services and have businesses run from there or working from there. What I love about this, not only the freedom of having that, is that even if you see the non-techie people, which is what I really want to get to, the non-techie people, because technology folks, I feel like now, before they're being, categorized as that nerd with the glasses in a basement in the dark, coding. And, I consider myself a tech woman.
Yeah, sure.
And people are always like, oh, but like, where do you learn how to code? And I'm like, I don't know how to code, but I'm in tech. And most of my career has been in technology. Why? Because there's so many different roles in technology. You don't need to be a coder to be in technology. It will be amazing if you learn the different languages of code, which is another part of learning.
You need to know how to talk to coders.
You need to learn how to talk to coders. You need to learn how these technologies apply to your life and apply to your client's life. And I think this is where the opportunity is if you start learning and be curious and start, there's so much wealth of knowledge. And talking about wealth, the wealth of knowledge is already out there, right? It's just to tap in and start being curious and figure out, where can I get an opportunity? Where can I manipulate this tool? Because technology, for me, I always say to the 4-year-old, to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, I say the same thing. Technology is just a tool. So it's as smart as you want it to be. And I feel like everyone, the first thing I say is the phone. Like, you probably are using 2% of your phone capabilities right now. So you could actually create amazing businesses run just from your phone if you understood all the technologies that came with the phone. I'm not saying
stay on that for a second, because we've got a guest coming up in the fall who's going to talk about the future of food. And we got into this conversation with developing countries seem to be further ahead in mobile tech because they have that mobile technology and they're getting, much more than in the developed world where it's a phone and a camera, and I guess it does a couple of other things, right? Where it is an absolute enabler in developing countries. Are you seeing that? Is that bearing out?
Absolutely. And not only with the phone, I think. So I started doing more research about this kind of concept of being rich and the rich helping the poor. And I feel like a lot of the times when you get to a point of your career, and let's say you're wealthy and you want to give back, it's so hard for someone in this level of wealth to give solutions to this level of wealth because it's so hard to empathize. So this is where I bring my design thinking brain into play. If you had never heard about design thinking, the main idea of design thinking is you build something that is user-centric first.
Yep, exactly.
You think about the user first, and then you start building innovation towards that. But what would be the best way to do this for me is to give the tools to these people to develop their own solutions, not to make them figure out what to do for them. First of all, they're not going to have time or knowledge, the empathy, or even the eagerness to do it. The easiest thing for them is just to give money.
Right.
But we know that if you give money to them, they don't even know what to do with it. So the whole thing of like teaching someone to fish and not give them the fish is the same thing. For me, what I really try to make or convey, let's say to the big companies as a call to action, build tools that allow them to become creators or their own innovation. And you're seeing it more and more now, which is what I'm so passionate about this topic, is because let's say with the decentralization, now we would say democratization of everything.
Right.
So democratization of technology is one thing that I think is happening now, where these people are going to start building tools for them to become wealthier and wealthier and wealthier.
So you said decentralization, it got me, or democratization, it got me thinking about decentralization and Web 3.0 and what's happening with decentralized banks and decentralized corporations. And we've had a few talks about that, on the show. We've talked about that. But I'm thinking of the last one was probably a year ago. I'm curious, are you seeing more and more of that activity? And that in itself is the enabling bit that allows these people to be able to work together and move up the wealth chain, if you will. Exactly.
I think this is one of the biggest technologies that is just promoting this type of movement. So, and since kind of blockchain came out, I was working at IBM at the time. And I remember it was a buzzword. Everyone wanted to talk about blockchain.
Sure.
Then it went downhill because we didn't know enough use cases to actually start putting blockchain. And for the ones that don't know, blockchain is the technology behind the cryptocurrencies and behind NFTs and all of this fun stuff that we have been kind of back and forward with. It came back now when we started talking about NFTs and Metaverse. I feel like now, last year we had like a downturn with all these terms because I think it was the NFT movement became a fad because only was utilized as kind of like, let's build something fun or cool for people to collect. Because the first ones that started doing it were artists, which, to be fair, it was a great tool for artists to break the barriers of entry of a very traditional industry, which was the art industry.
Sure.
Or let's say a Colombian, or let's say an Indian, or anyone in those countries that wanted to become famous as an artist, you had to move to a place like New York City and get to know a gallery, and then get your art showcase. Otherwise, you're going to end up dead and then famous like almost every artist in the world. So the fact that, platforms like OpenSea created almost like a gallery free, in a way free, for them to create art that was digital and people to buy it and get royalties from it was a complete disruption. However, why are these technologies now kind of trembling in? Because the use case has to be, how do I utilize this? How do I utilize a technology like NFT? What I love about when, I work with projects and my clients, when they ask me, how do I build a metaverse? I'm like, okay, first of all, what do we want a metaverse for? Why are you solving with this metaverse?
Right.
The metaverse is just going to be a digital campaign for you to say, I'm in the metaverse. That's super easy to do, and it's going to go away. It's going to be fun for now. It's going to be like any ad campaign that you put in a TV show. That's the result of it. You're going to drive potential attention to you. You're going to have PR, and that's it. But what is the functionality of really having you in a metaverse, or building a metaverse for yourself? And I think this is what we really need to think for. In gaming, for example, they're already cracking the code.
Sure.
In gaming, you can actually have digital assets like a shirt. That shirt will make you have your avatar, which is you digitally, having superpowers, let's say. You can run faster if you can have this shirt or these shoes that are digital. That's functional. Now,
you can also start a business selling super shirts to people who are in the metaverse, right?
Exactly. And then creators can come in and do that if they understood how the technology plays.
Right.
And then this happened to any industry. Imagine if you can create the same thing for banking, for insurance, for fashion. In fashion, they started creating things like the actual clothing that had other, let's say, characteristics in the digital world that are not only here in the physical. And maybe those things can tap things in the physical world, what we call the phygital experience. Let's say your digital wallet or like your digital bag could unlock, with a token, a promotion in the store. That's a whole different experience that you can create. So I always kind of encourage my clients and anyone to think, how can I utilize this technology? How do I add value to people's lives with this technology?
Nelly, you have given us so much to think about. You've just kind of got, thank you very, very much. Wow.